For question.
I'm happy to yield for a question without yielding.
By chance, or maybe because of the significance of it, my first question was very, very similar to what Senator Roberts has asked, because I've given a lot of thought to this. I haven't signed the letters. I haven't said how I was going to vote on this issue. But it was called to my attention that Senator Reid, the majority leader, flatly stated a month ago he believed in a single-payer system. They asked him, do you believe, is it your goal to move toward a single-payer system? And his answer, yes, yes, absolutely yes, close quote. I just left the Budget Committee hearing. We have a great team on there on the Republican and Democrat side. And my friend Sheldon Whitehouse, we had a little exchange about the health care bill. And I thought he was suggesting it wasn't much of a change. So I'd ask you this, Senator Cruz. So I said, well, the majority leader said he favored a single-payer system. He said, I do too. It wasn't long ago in the Budget Committee, Senator Bernie Sanders said he favored a single-payer system. And Senator Roberts mentioned others. And, of course, the President did. I checked the President's quote in 2003. He denied it since when he was trying to get the votes to pass it. But in 2003, he said he was a proponent, quote, of a, quote, single-payer universal health system, close quote. So I think this is a huge national issue. The legislation before us today is clearly driven by an agenda to have a single payer. So I'll ask you, Senator Cruz, if there's a single payer, who will the payer be?
The payer is always the government, which ultimately means the taxpayer, hardworking American families.
So in other words, the federal government...
I'll continue to yield for a question without yielding the floor.
So let me ask you first. So in other words, the government is going to be the one that pays for everything in health care in America. There will be only one payer, the government, and it will then, since it's a predominant power here, would be able to dictate health policy like the socialized medicine policies that have failed around the world, would it not?
The senator is absolutely correct. Once the government is paying for health care, it controls health care. And that has proven to be the case in every country in the world. Now, I agree with the senator from Alabama that it is commendable that there are some members of this body that openly embrace socialized medicine. That is commendable for candor. I don't agree with it as a policy matter. But I actually think there is virtue to speaking honestly about what it is you support and to not occupying the middle ground, to take a quote slightly out of context, as Teddy Roosevelt observed, of those cold, timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. One of the problems in this debate over Obamacare, there are relatively few who are candid that what Obamacare is designed to do. And it's worth noting, as Senator Sessions has, Majority Leader Reid is not a passive observer from the sidelines. He is the man responsible, in his role as Majority Leader, for passing Obamacare through this body with only Democratic votes, without a single Republican vote. And so when he says that it is designed to lead to a single-payer system, when he says that it is designed to lead to socialized medicine, we should trust that he knows what he's talking about on that.
Yield again for a question?
I'm happy to yield for a question without yielding the floor.
And isn't it true, since Senator Reid has made his position crystal clear ideologically, and based on the actions you've observed and I've observed, that he is steadfastly resisting any change whatsoever in the legislation that's passed certainly any change that would constrict its power and reach.
I think Senator Sessions is exactly correct. And if you look at the way this vote is set up, Republicans are being asked to vote with Majority Leader Harry Reid to shut off debate on this bill. Any Republican who votes yes on Friday or Saturday to invoke cloture will be voting alongside Majority Leader Harry Reid to give Leader Reid the authority to fund Obamacare using just 51 votes on a straight party line vote, which is exactly how Obamacare passed in the first place. At the same time, the Majority Leader has made clear that he's not going to allow other amendments. He's not going to allow amendments that would improve Obamacare, that would fix Obamacare. He's not going to allow Senator Vitter's amendment, as we talked about earlier, that would get rid of the congressional exemption and treat members of Congress the same as the American people. Get rid of President Obama's lawless exemption and stop treating members of Congress like a privileged ruling class who are different from the American people. But Leader Reid has said he's not going to allow a vote on that, not going to allow a vote on repealing the medical devices tax that has been crippling in the medical devices industry, that is killing innovation, that is killing jobs. If Republicans are complicit in shutting off debate and allowing just a single vote on funding Obamacare, then we have only ourselves to blame. If we give the Majority Leader the power to do that, we should not be surprised when he exercises it. Now, it is within the power of the 46 Republicans in this body to say no. To say no, we will not shut off debate that allows the Majority Leader to use 51 votes to fund Obamacare in a straight party line partisan Democrat vote. We will not be complicit in a process that treats members of Congress like a privileged ruling class and that ignores the cries for help from the American people. All we have to do that is for Republicans to stand together, to stand united. It is my hope, my fervent hope, that the voices of dissension within the Republican conference will stop firing at each other and start firing at the target. And let me be clear who the target is. The target is not Democrats. I don't want us to start firing at Democrats or the president or anyone else. It's not about us. The target is Obamacare. It is fixing this train wreck that is hurting the American people. And if members of the Republican conference in the Senate could devote 1/10 of the ferocity they have devoted to fighting within the caucus on this issue to actually stopping Obamacare, not a symbolic vote, not a press release, not a speech, actually fixing the problem, I could think of nothing better this Senate could do. And you know what? If instead of 100 senators, this chamber had 100 citizens picked from our states at random, I guarantee you not a one of them would say in discussing this, you know what we need is a bunch of symbolic votes. They wouldn't do it. Regular people who live on planet Earth. A symbolic vote is not a good thing or bad thing. They would say, if you grabbed any 100, I wouldn't even have a partisan screen on it. I'd grab 100 people at random. And I guarantee you they would say, we got to fix Obamacare. This thing is hurting people. The problem is too many members of this body are not listening, and we need to make D.C. listen.
Madam President, without yielding the floor, will the senator yield for another question?
Happy to yield for a question without yielding the floor.
Well, I noticed that the jobs created, there's been talk about a modest number of jobs, a real low number of jobs actually being created this year. And the reports were that 77% of those jobs that were created this year were part-time, not full-time jobs. Alan Meltzer, one of the great economists in the last 50 years and knowledgeable observers of our economy, just testified in the Budget Committee maybe 3 hours ago that Obamacare was a factor in that occurring. Would the senator agree that we've had this extraordinary increase in part-time jobs rather than full-time jobs, and that is hammering working Americans who need full-time work?
Senator Sessions is absolutely right. One of the most devastating consequences of Obamacare is it is forcing so many Americans into part-time work. U.S. Chamber of Commerce, 2013 second quarter small business survey, found that among small businesses that will be impacted by the employer mandate, 1/2 of small businesses, 50%, say that they will either cut hours to reduce full-time employees or replace full-time employees with part-time employees to avoid the mandate, and 24% say they will reduce hiring to stay under 50 employees. Now, as Senator Sessions knows, this is not one isolated anecdote here or there. This is, according to the Chamber of Commerce, 50% of small businesses reducing employees' hours forcibly or just hiring part-time employees instead. This is an enormous problem. And who gets hurt? Let me point out, when someone gets their hours reduced to 29 hours a week, it's never the CEO. It's usually not the lawyers. It's usually not the physicians, the professionals. It's absolutely never senators and members of Congress. The people whose hours get forcibly reduced are almost without exception the most vulnerable among us. They are young people. They're Hispanics. They're African Americans. They're single moms. It's the single mom working at a diner, struggling to feed her kids, to be a good example to her kids, who suddenly finds, instead of having one job where she works her fingers to the bone to take care of her kids, she's got to get two. Because look, 29 hours a week is not enough to provide for your kids. So suddenly she has two jobs, both at 29 hours a week. She's got to commute from one to the other. She's got to deal with two bosses. Boss number one says, I want you to work Tuesday morning. Boss number two says, I want you to work Tuesday morning. What's the single mom supposed to do? Earlier this afternoon, I read from a constituent letter talking about low-income housing in Virginia, where a significant percentage of the residents of that low-income housing were janitorial workers, were working in the service industry, were paying the rent out of their own pocket. And because of Obamacare, because of their having their hours reduced, they weren't able to pay the rent. In fact, let me read 2 sentences from this constituent letter from a commercial real estate broker in Chesapeake City, Virginia. Most of the tenants work in fast food, janitorial, and low-paying service-related jobs. A great deal of them had their hours cut to 29.5 hours per week and cannot pay the rent. So they're losing their apartments and being forced to live elsewhere. This is a tragedy playing out across this country, and it is incumbent on this body to listen to the people. We need to make D.C. listen.
Madam President, will the senator yield for a question only, without yielding the floor?
I will yield for a question without yielding the floor.
Senator Cruz, I know that you're aware that the number of people employed in the workforce today has fallen to the lowest level since 1975. Their wages have declined, and we've had a surge from, we learned today in our Budget Committee hearing, from around 300,000 people working part-time to 3 million, I believe, or a million. And these are bad trends. But one place has avoided all of that, and that's the Washington, D.C. area. It has had more job growth, higher income job growth than any place in America. If this bill becomes entrenched into law, will it not create a huge increase additionally of government workers and bureaucrats in and about this city, all riding on the backs of American workers?
The senator from Alabama is absolutely correct. One of the disturbing trends we've seen in recent years is the boom business in our economy is government. Now, there are lots of consequences to that. One is that the best and the brightest, they learn, hey, you want to have success, go into government. Private sector, that's apparently not what America is about. You look at, right now, government employees who are paid substantially more than their counterparts in the private sector. It's one of the reasons why Senator Vitter's amendment to say that members of Congress shall be subject to the same rules as the American people and not to have the special exemption President Obama's put in place is so important, and why I support an even broader amendment that would include all federal employees on the Obamacare exchanges, because our friends on the Democratic aisle routinely say Obamacare is terrific, it's great. If that's the case, then members of Congress should be excited about being on those exchanges, which are apparently so great for our constituents, and so should federal workers. But they're not. Indeed, as the senator from Alabama knows well, this issue has caused probably more consternation among members and congressional staff than probably any other issue, because people are quite rightly afraid of losing their health insurance, losing their coverage. That concern's not irrational. There are many good public servants who are congressional staffers, who are federal employees, even who are members of the Senate. It's not irrational at all for them to be concerned about losing their health insurance and forced onto poor quality health insurance. But that desire shouldn't push us to say, let's exempt them. We don't want to be subject to them. That desire should push us to fight for hardworking American families. That desire should say, if we don't want to be on the exchanges, let's not make anyone else be on it. That divide, the divide between Washington, the ruling class, and the American people, is the most significant reason for the disillusion we see in this country. The view from Americans all over this country, and this is true of conservatives and liberals, that Washington doesn't listen. Politicians don't listen. You know, we just had an August recess. A significant number of members of this body held no town halls, didn't go back and listen to their constituents. You can't fault Americans for saying politicians don't listen to us when, in fact, politicians don't listen to us. That's what this fight is about. Listen, if it is just up to Washington, we're not going to act to do anything to stop Obamacare. For one thing, members of Congress and their staff are exempted, so there's no urgency here. But if we listen to the American people, there is urgency. That is why it is so critical that we make D.C. listen.
Well, Madam President, will the Senator yield for another question?
I will be happy to yield for a question without yielding the floor.
Senator Cruz, I know you're aware that Senator Baucus, the chairman of the Finance Committee, a longtime senator who will be announced, I believe he's not going to run again, but shepherded this bill through and worked pretty well in many ways to try to make it better, lost some battles in that time, has referred to this as a train wreck because there's so many things going wrong right now. Did the Senator hear that from him? And so it seems to me that we're at a point where we've got to push hard, and that's what the conclusion I've come to. And I'll ask your opinion. It seems to me we're at a position where we need to push hard to force discussion of this legislation. because the majority leader wants to make it even bigger government, to take it even further, and he is blocking and going to resist any attempt to have real debate, real amendments to be offered. He will not allow votes, and he's going to fill the tree and otherwise dominate the Senate, so we can't even have the classical debate and amendments and votes to improve this train wreck of a legislation. Is that the way you see the situation we're in today?
Senator Sessions is absolutely correct. And, you know, I would note, first of all, that the Senate Democrat, who is the lead author of Obamacare, as you rightly note, has referred to Obamacare's implementation as, quote, a major train wreck. Now, that's not me speaking. That's not Senator Sessions speaking. That's the lead author of Obamacare, a Democratic senator. I commend his candor. It is indeed a major train wreck. I have no doubt that more than a few of his colleagues on that side of the aisle were unhappy with him for speaking the truth on that. You know what? There should be a lot more truth speaking in this body. Not engaging in partisan team politics, but speaking the truth for the American people. Look, that was commendable for Senator Baucus to speak up for the American people and say this is a major train wreck. We need to all acknowledge it's a major train wreck and then step forward to avert the train wreck. And Senator Sessions' second point is a very important one. I would note that Senator Sessions is an elder statesman in this body, has served admirably a great many years fighting for the citizens of Alabama, and is well experienced when a day and a time existed when the Senate operated like a deliberative body, where senators could speak and offer amendments, and amendments can be considered. That doesn't occur now. The practice that Senator Sessions referred to, I suspect folks at home may not be familiar with, called filling the tree. Filling the tree has become commonplace. What filling the tree is a procedural and parliamentary trick that only the majority leader can do. The majority leader has a privileged role under the Senate rules in that he has priority of recognition, the ability to insist he is the first senator on the floor to be recognized. And filling the tree enables him to do what he has said he is going to do on this bill, which is file an amendment to fund Obamacare in its entirety, and then fill the tree so that no other senator can offer any amendments on anything, so that the other 99 senators are muzzled, so that we can't offer amendments to improve Obamacare, we can't offer amendments to fix Obamacare, we can't offer amendments to do anything. Indeed, the more liberal members of the Democratic caucus can't offer amendments to adopt a single-payer socialized medicine system, which some of them openly embrace. That's a sign of a Senate that's not working. There should be open debate and there should be open amendments. It's one of the great strengths of this body, is that all 100 senators, for most of the history of the Republic, could offer any amendment at virtually any time. That has all but disappeared. And why has it disappeared? You know, it's not... For folks who are at home, who are watching this debate, it's easy to let the procedure make your eyes glaze over. When you hear someone talk about invoking cloture on the motion to proceed to the, it sounds like it's utterly incomprehensible to virtually anyone in the country. Indeed, more than a few people on the floor of the Senate right now, I suspect, don't quite understand what it means. But what's all the procedure about? Why should you care about filling the tree? You should care about it because it's a tool of power, of silencing the people and using the positions of power to enforce Washington's ideological view on the rest of this country. If we got out of Washington, D.C., if we went to the American people, said, what are your top priorities? You know, we actually have. We don't have to hypothesize about that. The American people over and over again say jobs and the economy are their top priorities. The American people want Obamacare stopped because it isn't working, it's killing jobs, it's pushing people into part-time work. And yet, this Senate has not been listening to the American people. We need to make D.C. listen.
Madam President, will the Senator yield for a question?
Happy to yield for a question without yielding the floor.
Senator Cruz, I would also just observe, and you probably are aware that it does appear there's a budget point of order against this whole continuing resolution. But I wanted to mention a couple of things. I want to thank you for having the courage to stand here and raise the concerns that I'm hearing all over my state. I had 3 separate meetings in August as I traveled the state with small business groups. It's difficult to overstate the concerns they have with this legislation. They tell me without a doubt it's impacting their willingness to hire, the uncertainty in the workplace, and it is damaging business in America, and they're really passionate about it. They're struggling to get by. They're laying off people, and they're not happy about it. And they say this bill alone is the primary thing that's hammering them in this country. And so I guess I've come and given a lot of thought to it. I'm beginning to see that we have just got to use the opportunities we have to confront this issue and talk about it and try to force some changes and improvements. And so I appreciate you, and I'm going to support you. And I'm going to oppose any advancing of the final bill that doesn't provide some change in this Obamacare legislation. I didn't sign the letter, and I've got some great friends who see it differently than I do. I, likewise, are totally opposed to this legislation. So I want to be sure that people who are listening need to know good people, I think, can disagree on this. But you've stood up and you've raised this question, and you've forced us to confront it and talk about it, and I think it's good. So I intend to support you, and I'm not going to vote to move a bill where we are sure we're going to be blocked from having any meaningful discussion on one of the most historic, damaging bills in maybe the last 100 years that would basically move us to single-payer, government-run, socialized medicine. And I think that's where we're heading. So I thank you for your leadership. Hopefully we can begin to force this Senate. The House has already acted. They have repeatedly acted to fix this legislation. It's so damaging. But the Senate, the Democratic Senate, refuses to act, refuses to listen. And that's the problem I have. And one way I have to express that is support your position. So thank you very much, and good luck.
Well, I thank the senator from Alabama for his question and fundamentally for his support. Your support is very meaningful. Senator Sessions is a man who is respected in this body, who commands the respect of his peers. And let me note